This meeting is being recorded.
Good evening and welcome to Rathdrum County. Tonight we're welcoming Kevin Lee, who's going to be discussing the Coollattin Estate in southwest County Wicklow. Well, a good part of County Wicklow actually, but it's also Earl Fitzwilliam's response to the famine on the estate. So Kevin is a native of Rathdrum County Wicklow, a town which was part of the former Fitzwilliam-owned Coollattin Estate. He spent his working career as Principal of Colaiste Bhride, a second level college located in Carnew, County Wicklow. Significantly, the catchment of the school is virtually identical to what once constituted the Coollattin Estate. While studying in UCD, Kevin developed a passion for 19th century Irish history and historical geography. He is a first-class honours graduate from UCD. Kevin is founder and chairperson of Carnew Historical Society, and he is a specialist on the socio-economic history of the 19th century Ireland and has lectured widely both in Ireland and in Canada on the assisted programme of emigration from South County Wicklow to Ontario, Canada. This was the largest such programme implemented during the course of the Irish potato famine. Kevin is the recognised expert on the history of the Coollattin Estate, which once extended over an area of 82,500 acres. Kevin, with his wife Eleanor, now fronts the Coollattin Canadian Connection. This initiative aims to reconnect thousands of Canadians with their South Wicklow roots. He has recently published 2 local histories, which came about from Kevin's daily Facebook history posts from the first lockdown of 2020, The Liar's Bench and Under the Fox, which supplies the reader with a multitude of various stories from across parts of what was the old Coollattin Estate. Coincidentally, it is worth noting that Rathdrum is now 2 years old and was initially designed to follow the same objective, to present our history publicly to people at home and give them something to look forward to each evening. With over 170 lectures in Rathdrum catalogue ranging across a broad spectrum of Irish history, from the prehistoric to the recent troubles, we welcome all aspects. Of course, it is worth mentioning that such dedication would not have come about without Rathdrum facilitator Liam O'Sullivan, and of course each and every lecturer and guest speaker. For those of you in tonight's audience who are new to Rathdrum, you can check out each of our recorded lectures on our YouTube channel under the same name. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'll pass you over to Kevin.
Thank you very much, Colin. And first and foremost, may I say welcome to the people in Ottawa and Toronto, in Los Angeles, New York, or watching here tonight. We hope you get some little bit of some nugget of information out of what we have to say. Now, the founding father of Coollattin Estate was a man called Thomas Wentworth, better known as Black Tom. Not called Black Tom because of his Protestant allegiance or anything like that. He generally dressed in black and rode on a black horse, and hence he was given the name Black Tom. His portfolio of property he put together in the 1630s. What we call the core area of the estate are the 2 southern baronies of Balnacar South and Shillelagh in County Wicklow. Across the Wexford border, he owned the Moutabower. North County Wicklow, the parish of Newcastle. He owns the town of Wicklow, extending as far south as Blaine Row. And he also owned the town of Rathdrum and a number of townlands such as Carballas and in the neighbourhood of the estate town of Rathdrum. Now, people get confused with Wentworths, Rockinghams, Fitzwilliams, and they all have their own part to play in the history of the estate. Thomas Wentworth, as we said, was the founding father. He put together the estate in the 1630s. He was a friend of Charles I of England. Some would say the only friend that Charles I had. And like Charles I, he lost his head at the Tower of London in 1641. He was beheaded. And in 1660, the Restoration, the lands were given back to his son, William Wentworth. 1695, William Wentworth died, and the estate devolved to a nephew, Thomas Watson Wentworth. There was a breach in the male line of inheritance, so Watson Wentworth came into power. Now, this guy is important because he's the only one of the whole people who administered the estate in Coollattin who didn't have a royal title. He wasn't a marquis, he wasn't an earl, he was just plain old Thomas Watson Wentworth. When he took over, he had to put Wentworth into his name. It was a codicil in the will, and also he had to undertake to live at Wentworth Woodhouse in Yorkshire. 1723 he died. The first Earl, Thomas Wentworth became the first Marquess of Rockingham. The man was very fond of his red port wine. He died in 1750 and was succeeded by Charles, the second Marquess of Rockingham, twice Prime Minister of England. Contracted the flu in 1983 and died from the flu. And again, the male line was breached, and the estate devolved to the fourth Earl Fitzwilliam. Now, the Coollattin had been planted by his predecessor, Thomas Watson Wentworth, the guy who we said had no royal title, but he was the man who brought over all the colonists to Coollattin. He insisted that they were all Protestant. He wanted a Protestant colony established in South Wicklow, and a colony that would be loyal to the Crown of England. The Fitzwilliams were a different breed altogether. They were more ecumenical, to use a more modern term, and they felt that all people should be treated equally. The fourth Earl was appointed Lord Lieutenant in Ireland. His first act was to introduce full Catholic emancipation. He was withdrawn after 6 weeks, and Dublin City went into mourning when he was withdrawn to England. Succeeded by the fifth Earl, the sixth Earl, seventh Earl, eighth Earl. The 9th and 10th are not that interesting because after Lord Peter Fitzwilliam was killed in 1948, they succeeded, and they never had any interest in Coollattin. They never came to Coollattin. So it's the other earls that we would be more interested in. The first Marquess of Rockingham built Wentworth Woodhouse in England, one of the largest residential palaces in Europe, 5/8 of a mile long, and it'd take you 1 hour and 20 minutes to walk through every corridor in it. It was built in the Baroque style of red brick building, but when it was completed, they suddenly thought, sure, even the coal miners in Yorkshire have red brick houses, so red brick is not the in thing to have. So they built another house on the back of it, Wentworth Woodhouse, built in Palladial style. One looks one direction and the other looks the other, and they are linked together. They were all built with money that came from County Wicklow, about half and half from the rentals paid by the tenants and half from the income from the forest of the oak forest in Shillelagh. But a magnificent building and being restored at a humongous cost at the moment. A place well worth visiting if anyone ever has that inclination. Much more humble is the one at Coollattin. Just completed when the 1798 rebellion started and was burnt to the ground by a group of Wexford rebels under the command of Esmond Kine. Rebuilt between 1799 and 1804, incorporated part of the old building which was there before the rebellion and part of the new plans by John Carr. But it's good to see it being restored to its former glory. Well, it's been put back together again by its new owners at the moment. Now we can jump on a bit to what we want to talk about tonight is the Fitzwilliam response to our darkest hours, which were the mid-years of the 19th century, and particularly the famines which occurred. A lot of famines. We had one in 1817, we had another in 1826, we had one in 1832, and then we had one that wouldn't go away that came in 1845. But the response to the famines came with the assisted program of emigration, which began in 1832. And here you won't be able to read about, take my word, it's accurate. It's the list of people who were given assistance to emigrate in 1832, mainly from the southeastern parish of Eighhold. Virtually all of them are from there. And down about 1/3 of the way on it, you'll find a guy called Joe Dunn. Now, this is the remnants of Joe Dunn's old house in a place called Killabeg. Colin will know where this one is, and this is where Joe Dunn left from. Now, why we mention him is because when he sailed to Quebec in 1832, he brought with him a little prayer book that he had in the family from the 1780s. And in the margins and on the sides of that book, he has written bits and pieces about the history of the family. He wrote a piece when his wife died from typhus in 1822. More importantly, in 1832, he wrote on the very bottom of the page 52, on the left-hand side there, he wrote that on the date that he left Dublin on board ship to sail to Canada. Now, given the date that he wrote that on, we were able to trace it back, and we found that he left on a sailing bark called the Chillas, which was owned by the firm of James Miley in Dublin. So every little event from the 1780s up to the present day, a girl called Maureen Quinn in a town called Belleville in Ontario still has this little prayer book, and I had the privilege to look at it when we met up with Maureen in Kingston a few years ago. But a wonderful little book. From 1780 to the present day, it has remained in the one family, and it gives every major event in the history of that family. Now, the assistance that was given to the immigrants in the 19th century, starting in 1732 and going right up until there's mention of people being assisted to emigrate in the 1860s. In most instances, the house had to be demolished. A condition of getting assistance to emigrate, the house had to come down. Secondly, the passage to Quebec was paid in full. The tenant was compensated for any assets that he had. Maybe he had a house where there was some building stone or some granite that could be used, even a manure heap. There was money paid out for any assets to belong that tenant had before he surrendered his property. A provisions allowance was paid. This was in addition to what the people emigrating, they had to get a statutory allowance of foodstuffs according to the various passenger acts. They were also given clothing grants. The men with the chalk and the scissors and the tailors of the day, they made good money out of the estate because a lot of people had to get clothing grants and had to get suits of clothes and clothing made before they went to Canada. Money was provided to enable the families to move inland. To move inland once they reached Quebec or Toronto or Montreal, they were given land to move up the Ottawa River and the Rideau Canal, or to move inland in Canada. Each family was given a sea chest crafted in the new building yard, which had been just established in Coollattin. Ironically, they were made of Canadian pine. Some families had so many extended family going with them, they had to be given 2 or 3 sea chests. Transport in New Ross was provided. Every available horse and cart was commandeered to get the passengers to New Ross. And sometimes the winds weren't favorable for the ship to sail, and they would have to get upkeep overnight or 2 or 3 nights in New Ross before they would sail. And again, the money was paid for them. This is the road that took from Coollattin to New Ross. It's the old road. People from here would normally travel this road, although nowadays you generally go the motorways through Enniscorthy. But this is the old back road. You notice it's more or less a straight line from once you reach Kildavin through Kilteely and Ballywilliam and Rathnure, Killan, that direction, and on from Shillelagh to New Ross. That was the road that was black with people from Coollattin, particularly from 1847 and 1848. The final parting place was a place called Gatton in Nor, or the Gateway of Tears. It's at Kildavin, at the confluence of the Derry River and the Slaney River, where the 2 rivers meet. This was the place where they said goodbye to their neighbours and their family. Generally, the priest came with them and imparted his blessing to them as they knelt and prepared to set off on the road to New Ross. This was the final parting place. This was the final place where they would get a view of the Wicklow Hills before they left. And at that time, you were destined never to return. It wasn't like nowadays. Here we have 2 people from the city of Hamilton standing, and came back a few years ago, standing at the Gateway of Tears. Some of you will have seen this obelisk, this marble obelisk outside the main door of the church in Shillelagh. It's the contributions of the tenants put up this obelisk over Ralph Lawrenson. Ralph Lawrenson had a vital role in the immigration program. I reckon it was he who overlooked the whole thing. It was he who decided who should go and who should stay, or who were eligible to go and who wasn't eligible to go. He spent 49 years as the underagent at Coollattin. He came with Robert Challoner Sr. around 1826 or 1827. The family originated in the Orkney Islands. But he was the man who went with the emigrants to New Ross. He paid the porters to bring the sea chests on board sailing ships. He paid them their allowances. He paid out the money. He was the money bags, and he was the man who looked after the whole program. Not as we often think, Earl Fitzwilliam or his agent, Robert Challoner. Actually, the Challoners had more to think about in the 1840s, because there was a a rip-roaring argument going on with two Reverend clergymen, the Reverend Henry Moore in Carnew and the Reverend Dowse in Shillelagh, over the provision of education on the estate, and that involved cases which went to the Court of Chancery in Ireland, went to the highest court in the land. Also, Robert Challoner Jr., who took over in 1843, he married the butler of Ardatton, and she died when she was 18. His wife died giving birth to their first child, so they had enough to think about on their plate without. But all the indications are that it was Ralph Lawrenson was the man, the underaged, who looked after the program. Unfortunately, he hasn't left none of Lawrenson's books kept or retained in the National Library of Ireland. We have all Challoner's letters, Robert Challoner's letters, and strangely, I think in 1847, only 3 of Robert Challoner's letters referred to the assisted program, or actually referred to the famine, let alone the assisted program, which means that the whole program had been delegated down to this guy called Ralph Lawrenson. Here's the Dunbrody ship, well worth a visit. Most of you, I presume, have been there already, but it's a replica famine ship built in New Ross and funded by the J.F. Kennedy Trust. The Immigrants, we'll have a look at a few case studies now, and this is John Kavanagh of Parkmore near Carnew in County Wicklow, Parkmore, Kilcavan area, just north of Carnew. His father, James Kavanagh, set off in 1852 with his wife and 5 children. When they got to Quebec, they got the train as far as Toronto, and they then had to walk 57 miles to where they were going to set up house in a town called Barry. And at Newborough, a town called Newborough, he was disappointed to find that he had to pay a toll charge when crossing a bridge in Newborough with what little money he had. In that town, he bought 2 piglets and a bag of corn to bring to his new farm, which was near the town of Barry. The first year's corn was harvested, and the 2 sons, including this guy here, they were commissioned to bring the corn to a mill, which was a long distance away, to have it made into flour. They fell asleep at night, and during the night, the wolves tore open the sacks and spread the wheat on the ground. So you get an idea from that man how resilient and how brave these people were. This is the old Kavanagh home, what remains of it in Parkmore today. Here we have an old house in Mine. As you travel from the village of Mine to Knockannana, there's a turn on a road called Hutton's Hill, and Hutton's Field is beside it. Nobody ever knew who the Huttons were. Today they don't know. People, well, they probably do after this, but at the time they didn't know who the Hutton family were. But that's the rear wall of the house, Hutton's house. Now, the little books for deciding the condition of the people and who wanted to go and who would be given the opportunity to go, or who would be suitable applicants to go to Quebec. All that work was delegated to lower class agents within the estate, people like wood rangers and gamekeepers. They went around with these little tiny little notebooks, and they took notes about the family. Now, you can't read this very well, but I'll read it for you. Probably it's coming across there. Mrs. Hutton says, very unusual for the 19th century. Here was the woman of the house who was stating why the family should go. After all, it was Mrs. Hutton who was from the neighbouring town in the Corndog, rearing a large family in a tiny house. She was the one that had to put the bread on the table. It was her that would have to make the case. And you notice how he spells allow, A-L-O-W. These were lower pass. They wouldn't have been very literate. He says that Mrs. Hutton would allow the house to be taken down. Mr. Kenna is the landlord, and they have lived in the house for 18 years. A wonderful piece of social history, this, because you can learn so much from the 6 or 7 lines that are in it. You can go back the 18 years to 1827, when a survey of those living on the estate was being kept. And you'll find out that in 1827, that Mrs. Hutton was a Hopkins, and she had married Thomas Hutton, and they were living in a place called Corndog 18 years. So we know that he was a farm labourer there, and they built the house there, and then they moved on and they lived in this place called Schlaghkyle before they went. And they also had reared Abai de Rare from Bertus is at the bottom of it as well. This lady here is from British Columbia and a descendant of the Huttons, a direct descendant of the Huttons, standing at the rear wall of the house. Brenda Chapman here from Ottawa. This is a little part of the estate. The town out of Monroe lies within County Wexford. And Brenda came back some years ago to visit to try and find out where the Priestley family, or Presley as they were called here, had left from this place in Monroe. And from the old estate maps, the beauty of the Fitzwilliam estate is in 1842 they prepared estate maps on a scale of 12 inches to a mile, more or less, that allows you to determine where every family on the estate lived in 1842. So we were able to find for Brenda where her ancestors came from. And here she's standing at the walls of the old white house in Ballyellis. Now, we went through the fields to where the house was. We found a couple of very interesting things. First of all, this is a duck's nest, or a place that I had for rearing. The old Presley house had been demolished in the late 1990s. It was there until then, but what remains is a duck's nest. There's a hollow behind the two entries to this, and it was a place where the family reared ducks to try and prevent foxes and other wildlife stealing the ducklings or stealing the eggs. But this was a place where they reared their ducks. That was all that remained of the house. That and the plum tree. The plum tree had survived 170 years, maybe by regenerating itself. And the local proprietor of the farm, every year she makes plum jam sorry, not the plum jam, it's damson jam she makes from the damsons that was in Presley's yard. The Bell family, the school height in Carnew. Edward Bell that left from here, he was a blacksmith. He had 9 children between the ages of 8 and 20. In 1847, he was reduced to living on soup from the local soup kitchen at the Wool Green in Carnew. And it just goes to show you that craftsmen and tradesmen such as Edward Bell suffered probably the most during the famine. If you were dying trying to keep the body and soul of your family together and keep some food on the table, the last thing you'd think about was bringing your ass to be shod with the local blacksmith, or going to get a farm implement repaired or get a farm tool made. Would have been very, very low on your priority. So in 1847, Edward Bell upped sticks from this house on the school height in Carnew and left for Ontario. He left behind him his name. Before he moved to this new house in 1830, which was a new house in 1830, he lived in Bell's Lane. So he, just like Hutton's Corner, where the previous family lived, this guy lived in Bell's Lane before he moved to this house. And with his 9 family, he set off to Quebec. Now, unusually, he didn't go live in Canada. He went south into the United States, and his love of metal work and forge work and whatever, he gained employment in the great city of Cincinnati. And living in California today is Merritt Mullen, who is a direct descendant of Edward Bell, who left from Carnew blacksmith in 1847. Again, Colin will be familiar probably with this place. Is on the borders of Bowley and Monacullen, as the old house where the first Cod family came. The Cod family became spread all over the whole area of South Wicklow in subsequent years. But this was where the family, where the family set themselves up. Now these 2 girls, Cod girls from British Columbia, are standing at the old Cod house in a place called Bowley. And in 1821, it was a very complex families. No less than 3 George Codds emigrated, and they're all cousins. But one of the George Codds emigrated from this house in 1821. And that George Codd, who left in 1821, is the direct ancestor of Alice Monroe, who was the only Canadian woman to have won a Nobel Prize for Literature. Alice Monroe is famed for her short stories, and many of her short stories deal with life in a place called Beckwith, where the family settled. Life on the frontier in Canada of the Code ancestors, and she won the Nobel Prize back in the 1990s. Here's another member of the Cods or the Codes. They became Code in Canada. A lot of our names became altered when they went to Canada. Cods became Code. Rothwell became Ratwell. Cosgraves became Coscar. Incidentally, these names still survive. We know the Cosgraves are in Carnew still, and they still call them Coscars. The locals still call them Coscars. Here is David Code, standing where his old farm place of his ancestors stood, in a place called Ballingate in Carnew. David is a travel writer. He travels the world. He's in Germany this week, I think, and he's fluent in 5 languages, including Japanese. And again, his ancestors left from this little house in Ballingate, or Bullingate as they call it. This is the remains of the Foster home. Jim Foster his ancestors left from this little house here in Motobower. Now, Jim Foster became very, very famous in Alberta. He became Attorney General in Alberta. He was also Minister for Higher Education in Alberta. This is the house in anticipation of Jim's arrival home. The current owners cleaned it out and cleaned it up a bit so that we could see the extent of it. And you can see the line around it. It was a little 2-story house. And this is where the widow Foster, Jim Foster's ancestor, left from. Not only that, we found where the Roach family, on his maternal side, the Roach family came from just up the laneway. And here is Jim Foster at the house of his maternal line, where the Roach family came from. We still have Roaches, who would be the 4th or 5th, maybe 6th cousins of this man here. A few years ago, we had what was known as the Homeward Trek. There was a Lawrence family, I think there were 4 or 5 of the Lawrence family that came with us. And on one of the days we went off on a picnic. We didn't tell them where they were going, but we went up a place called Lawrence's Lane in the townland of Schlarrow or Schleevrow, near mine in Badden. And we stopped for a picnic at a little old ruins, and we told them that was where John and Martha Lawrence left in, I think it was 1851, with their 9 children to travel to Canada. Old Martha, she lived to be, I have a picture of her celebrating her 100th birthday in Canada. So she reared 9 children here. She spent 6 weeks crossing the Atlantic, traveled inland, hardship in Canada just as much as hardship in Ireland, survived until she was 100 years of age on all the hardship. A wonderful, wonderful, wonderful woman and a wonderful family, really. Now we move on to some surviving artifacts. Thomas Hayden was a blacksmith like Edward Bell, and he left from Ballynulta. And this is the blanket in which the Hayden family wrapped their precious belongings in when they were traveling to Ontario. It's amazing in Canada how people cherish and remember their Irish ancestors and cherish the bits and pieces that came from their native land in Ireland. Here we have airbrushed the memory of the famine from our folk memory. I suppose it's not the type of thing you'd put on your CV, that my great-great-grandfather died with his mouth green from eating the grass, died like an animal on the side of the road, or had to go to the workhouse to die, or had to have his fare paid to Ontario. We don't remember the famine. We just kind of airbrushed it from our folk memory. In Canada, it's different. The people who come back to us on a regular basis nowadays, they're proud, and they're very, very proud of their Irish roots, and they're proud of where they came from. So that old blanket is still existing. It went from Ontario, it went to New York, and I think it's now somewhere around Los Angeles, but has traveled with the family over many, many generations, and is still in the family. The Cosgrave, Joseph Cosgrave or Cosgrove, left from near Shillelagh, near Deer Park, Shillelagh, if anybody knows where Deer Park is. and he brought with him an axe for to log the trees. Part of the agreement in Canada was that you had to clear an area of trees and build your house and get it ready for agricultural purposes or what, but they still have the axe that he brought with him and that he used in those early days in Canada. It's still in the possession of the Cosgrove family. Here is an old wooden chest that survives in a basement in Ottawa. These were made from Canadian pine in the building yard in Coollattin. They're very distinctive because I think the Coollattin carpenters had their own quite distinctive method of dovetail joints, and also the Coollattin nailers made their nails with a kind of a little rose head pattern on them, so you can distinguish them. And quite a few of those, I would imagine, are storing blankets and storing bits and pieces in many a house throughout the places in Canada, the places where the Irish Coollattin immigrants set up settlements. The James family, again from the parish of Aghold, they went to near the town of Fergus and set up a farm there, and they were so proud of their ancestry that the farm was called from its early days Coollattin, after the place that they left. The Gelbvi there is a breed of cattle that have won many awards for. The James family are also probably one of the most famous horse breeding families in Canada. They had the leading 3-year-old male horse a few years ago, and it was named Shillelagh Slough after their native. Shillelagh was the leading 3-year-old in Canada at the time, but still very proud of their Canadian roots. And 6 of that family will be coming home in September. A few surviving images. How many of you there have an image of one of your ancestors who lived during the famine years or survived during the famine years? Not very many. I certainly haven't, and I doubt if I've ever seen one in Ireland of somebody who actually lived through the famine and had their photograph taken. I suppose photography in Canada was at a more advanced stage than it was in Ireland at the time, and probably when they got established in Canada, they could better afford to have their photograph taken. This is Sal Kenny, who be Sarah Balfe as she was. Sarah Kenny, Sarah Balfe and Tommy Balfe left for Canada in 1847. You still have Balfe's Well, where they got their fresh water. The Balfes are long gone from the area now, but the well where they got their fresh water every morning is still called Balfe's Well, and the field where they lived is still called Balfe's, or nearby where they lived was still called Balfe's Meadow. But here we have a picture in latter years of old Sarah Sal Balfe, who again survived the journey with her family and set up near the town of Smiths Falls. Actually, the golf club in Smiths Falls is on a farm that belonged to this family. And a few years ago, we had the privilege of unveiling a monument to the memory of the people who left Coollattin at Smiths Falls Golf Club. It was unveiled by the then Irish ambassador to Canada. Simon Byrne. Simon Byrne was 12 years of age when he left Money with his family. He was only 12. His father was a labourer with Richard Codd, the same Richard Codd as we have there now, and there's still the same farm. Was still the Richard Codd came down through the generations in that family. But Simon was 12 years of age. Now, what's unusual with this man, he was the only man who sailed on board the Start in New Brunswick. This was the unfortunate ship where you had a lot of disease and a lot of confusion when they got there. Earl Fitzwilliam, or the railway company, had requisitioned 100 able-bodied men, but when the ship arrived, the Star arrived, they had old men 70 years of age, they had 12-year-old boys like Simon here, and even younger, and a lot of them were disease-ridden. A lot of them had died on board the ship to there, but Simon survived, and this is him in later life. Winifred Doyle of the Crab Lane. Again, she was, I think it was John Doyle went out in advance of her, and she was sent home the money to bring her out. Maureen Frances Doyle, a descendant, would have has written quite a good novel on this period and on the family. Thomas Kenny, we saw Sal Kenny a minute ago. This was her brother. He was the black sheep of the Kenny family of Kennystown. I don't know what the falling out with the family was, but he didn't have any land, and he was working as a farm labourer with the Connors family of Mortebower. And the Connors family brought him with them when they were going to Canada. And his descendant, a guy called Joe Kenny, now lives in Nebraska, and Joe comes home regularly to visit in Coollattin. Anne Loughlin, or Anne Wall, from Lara near Strathnakelly. Unusual, Anne Wall was married to William Wall. She was a Catholic, he was a Protestant. I don't think either of them was for turning, and children were baptized in both churches. The children were baptized in the Catholic register, appear in the Catholic register for Clonmore, and they also appear in the Church of Ireland, or the established or Church of Ireland register for Mullinacuff. Oh, it's getting near the end now. Hope people are not getting too bored. Dr. Abraham Groves, again, Killinure man, an Aghoad man, a Southwest Wicklow man. One of the most famous names in Canadian history. He performed the first appendectomy using his kitchen table to perform the operation on. He also pioneered the use of radiation treatment for cancer. A very, very famous medic in Canada. Set up established the hospital in a place called Fergus, the Fergus Memorial Hospital. That's now the Groves Memorial Hospital, named after him, but quite a famous Canadian medic. Now, state-funded schools. All in all, the estate funded about 33 or 34 schools dotted throughout the estate. They're very fussy about education in those schools. They were determined that Catholics and Protestant tenants should get equal treatment in it, and that it led to bitter disputes, particularly in Carnew in the 1840s. But they spent on, as I said, they spent money on sites, teachers, provision of textbooks, and so on for at least 34 schools throughout the estate. And there's plenty of evidence within the Coollattin papers that tenants going, particularly the tenants emigrating, if they hadn't got an education, they were going to be no use to society in Ireland, and they certainly wouldn't be any use to the society in their adopted land. And it's probably one of the reasons why our Coollattin descendants have done so well for themselves in Canada, and so many of them have reached the top level in medicine, in agriculture, horse training, you name it. You get Coollattin people up there at the very top in Ontario. This is the school in Chilala, still used as a schoolhouse. Celebrated his 200th anniversary last year, I think. This is Sonny Gregan's house in Coolrow. It was the old school in Coolrow. If you look at the exact same plan, the exact same build as the one in Chilala, the two buildings are exactly the same. But the old teacher here, a guy called Fitzhenry, while this school was being built, he was granted permission to use his cowhouse as a school for the children, and he had a big name as a teacher, and a very efficient teacher. Littlewood Hall, it is now, as a school in Littlewood, or the school in Coolkenna. This was one of the failures, really. There was a lot of given out about what was happening within this school, which you haven't time to go into tonight, but it wasn't successful as the other flagship schools on the estate. Now, finally, we've talked about assisted emigration, but it was only part of a wide-ranging program of assistance to the tenants on the Coollattin Estate. We go through a few examples of what was happening here. Retraining of apothecaries. Now, apothecaries were a kind of, I suppose you could call them quack doctors. There were people who had their own potions passed down from father to son and down through the ages. They didn't have any formal training in medicine or medical procedures. But an example would be a guy called John Glendinnon in Carnew. He was an apothecary. They sent him to Trinity College, where he qualified as a doctor, and he came back to work and practice in the village of Carnew. The provided sites for workhouses in Rathdrum and Shillelagh. Now, Shillelagh is interesting because in 1833, the Earl Fitzwilliam had built a beautiful little neo-Gothic church in the village. Most of you will have admired it or have seen it, a little Protestant church in Shillelagh, built in 1833 to use for people who are visiting Coollattin. The who's who would come on parties to Coollattin, so he wanted a nice little church to bring him to, not the old one in Carnew that had went there for generations, but to build this lovely little church. Now, 5 years later, a workhouse was to be built in South Wicklow, and Fitzwilliams had 85,000 acres to provide a site for that workhouse. Where did they provide it? Within a stone's throw of the church. They could have built it in Carnew, they could have built it in Tinnahealy, they could have built it in Coolby, Coolafancy, anywhere else in South Wicklow, but they weren't proud. They weren't too proud to build it right beside the church that they had built 5 years previously. They provided fever hospitals, Wicklow Town and Tinnahealy. This is one that comes up regularly in the account books for the 1840s. I think called Going to the Sea. For many a day, I thought this was people who were emigrating, that they were getting their money to go to the sea, to emigrate, to get a ship to go to the sea, but it wasn't. A fairly well-known cure at the time for rheumatism and rheumatoid arthritis and various other complaints, similar conditions that emerged. A lot of them would have emerged because people were living in damp conditions and the old houses weren't very waterproof, and people had to live in damp conditions, and they got these afflicted with these diseases. And the estate, well-known cure from at the time was to go and bathe in the seawater. So they were given money to go and bathe in the sea in Courtown or wherever else. The funding for the hospitalization of estate workers, lots and lots of mention of people who had lost limbs or lost eyes, and they were given money to go to Dublin hospitals and come home, sometimes with one limb. A lot of cases, the money was passed on to the priest, who would then give it to the family to get this worker transported to Dublin. There was also funding for the use of Holloways. Now, Holloway was a strange type of medicine. They had pills and they had medicine bottles. It was a kind of a snake oil. It was a kind of a cure-all in the 19th century. No matter what you were suffering from, Holloways would cure it. So there was quite a lot of money expended on Holloways, pills and ointment and liniment for the tenants on the Coollattin Estate. Now, the Connors family in Tumbrain had been a meeting place for the United Irishmen, and Bid Dolan in her evidence, the trial of Billy Burnaballymanis, gave evidence of how she had seen people being sworn into the Society of United Irishmen in the Connors Forge in Tumbrain. Now, 50 years later, the estate gave the same Connors family, paid them money to do a lot of these things, reaping hooks. Now, the theory was that if labourers were given one of these, they would become more employable and they would be able to earn a living for themselves. So the estate paid the Connors family, famous blacksmith family in Tumbrain near Carnew, for they were well qualified in ironwork, having made hundreds and hundreds of pikes in '98, but now they were making reaping hooks for Earl Fitzwilliam. Here's an advertisement for the Holloways pills and ointment. It was advertised in every paper of the time, and it was a cure-all for people suffering. So thank you, and thanks for your attention, and hope you got some little from it. And I don't know how the time is, Colin. Are we running below? We're good. I think we're a few minutes early, so we have time for a few questions or discussion.
Yeah. No, that was absolutely brilliant. Really enjoyable. I really like the case studies with the local examples to me, because Simon Simon Byrne, was it? Simon Kenny?
Simon Byrne from Labour with Richard Codd, yeah.
Yeah, the home place would only be only a field away from here. Like it's
very near where you live,
small.
yeah.
And but you mentioned Littlewood School and the controversy with that. I just remembered it was just the local story around here. Is if you look at it from the sky from Google Maps, you can see that the school is actually built. It's got a cruciform design. It was actually originally designed to be for the Catholic. It was meant to be a Catholic school, wasn't it, or the home for the priests, wasn't it?
I think so. Yeah, but yeah. They were very determined. They're very determined that Catholics and Protestants should get an equal right to education. The whole thing flared up in Carnew when they allowed the Catholic priest in to teach religion at one particular time, and the Protestant minister would go in at the same time and teach the Protestant religion. But the Protestants weren't buying it. They wouldn't allow their children to be taught from the Dawei Testament or the Dawei version of the Bible. And they went on strike, but changed days indeed. I couldn't see children being withdrawn from a school nowadays because of the version of the Bible that they were using. I don't think that would cut the mustard at the moment. But they were to go to any lengths to make sure that there wasn't any kind of discrimination.
Yeah, the Fitzwilliams, from just knowing a general history of them, they seem to be very liberal throughout the generations of the Earls.
Yeah. And they were very anti-orange. A lot of, as you know, there was at least three prominent orange lodges in the area. You had Coollattin, Healy and Carnew, and they had their parade 12th of July every year, and there was always a lot of riots at them and a lot of disturbance and a lot of sectarianism at them. But it goes to show you the Hintina Healy, and in 1832, I think it was, but the two effigies that threw on the bonfire, one was of the Blessed Virgin and the other was of Robert Challoner, the agent at Coollattin. The two of them burned side by side on the 12th of July bonfire. But that it gives you a little insight into the thinking in Coollattin and
Yeah, socially it seems a bit of a divided estate at times. I remember you mentioned before. I remember I read on a comment or a post that you put up about how the Orangemen used to march out to the site of the Battle of Ballyelis.
Yeah.
And it used to be a custom. What was the custom that they used to do?
Yeah, there was a lady there called Hannah Johns. They used to lay wreaths on the Britons' grave. The Britons was a regiment of ancient Britons. They were wiped out at the Battle of Ballyelis in 1798. They were annihilated, and they were all buried in a mass grave in Ballyelis. But the Orangemen used to march out to lay wreaths on the grave. And an old lady called Hannah Johns, as soon as they were gone, she used to let out her sow to eat the garlands out the grave. But the crossroad is still called Hannah Johns Cross. But yeah.
Yeah, that was an extreme tough battle, as you know, and like all around Wicklow, not just Wexford as well. But Wicklow saw its fair share of the '98 rebellion. But before now, I read out some of the questions here. Now, I'm just going to give people a reminder. Anybody who's unfamiliar with Kevin, from people who are from across the country here now, if you like, you can follow Kevin on Facebook or his page Coollattin Canadian Connection. He's also got the website Coollattin Canadian Connection, www.com, and you'll be able to see a lot of his updates. But one note I just want to mention here it's worth noting: there's an international famine summer school at Coollattin House near Shillelagh. It's on the 2nd to the 4th of September. So there's a planned event where there's going to be lectures, a pageant, a Victorian banquet, guided tours of the former Coollattin Estate, and speakers will include Kevin, Tom Jenkins, Dr. Kevin Whelan, Dr. Mark McGowan of the University of Toronto, one of our older guests on the Trust in here, Dr. Edith Milne, and it's going to be a wonderful gathering of you're going to see people from all across Ireland and Canada will be coming together. And so if anyone's interested in going to that, you can just follow Kevin and you'll see more updates regarding that. But now we'll just have a look at the questions here now, and let's see how we get on. No, it was truly fascinating talk, Kevin. It was very
thanks Colin.
So we have one from Sinead Maguire. Can I just clarify, does Fitzwilliam pay for the Irish tenants to emigrate, which we know he did, and She says, I have just read Darkness Falling, and it explained that it was cheaper for landowners to pay for tenants to emigrate and set the land to grain rather than keep the tenants on the land. But we know that it was the overcrowding.
That is quite true. Yeah, it would have been cheaper in the long run than to pay for the upkeep in the workhouse. That's well-known fact. Yeah.
Yeah. We have another one here. Did the immigrants know where they were going to in Canada and where their lands were going to be allocated?
Yeah. There was a long tradition of emigration from the estate in going back to the post-Napoleonic era. There's a lot of those people that we mentioned from your neck of the woods, Colin, from Aghole, the Jameses and the Chamneys and the Twamleys and the various. They're all the families who had served probably in the yeomanry force in Money House, Nixon's yeomanry, but they were afraid they were going to be burned out again. So there was a kind of a mass exodus of these people to a place called the county of Lanark in Ontario. They got free land out there. They had experience in using firearms, so they were valuable to defend what was British North America, or as it was known then, to defend Canada against incursions from across the US border. They were valued for their ability to use the firearms, and they got a lot of land there. There was also a lot of correspondence back and forth between the people who left and the people who were going. Now, later on, a lot of people from the Aghole area went to the same place, the Smiths Falls area, the county of Lanark in Ontario. There's a famous story of how families who got assistance to emigrate in the 1840s traveled across the Atlantic, traveled inland to a place called Rideau Ferry. And on their arrival at their new destination, who did they see? Only the Jameses and the Chamneys and the various people who had left 30 years earlier, and they all marching in an orange parade down the street in Rideau Ferry the day they arrived. So they had travelled across the Atlantic to get away from that, and there they were confronted with it once again. But a lot of them would have known, and only recently I came across a lot of correspondence in the RTC in Waterford. The Graves papers are there. There's a lot of correspondence between priests such as Father Michael Murphy and Tom O'Cork, and where they were kind of acting as an intermediary between the agents and the people that were in Canada. Probably the priests were literate and they were able to get the letters out there, but the priests were acting as intermediaries between the people and the Graves Shipping Company.
Yeah. Just on that point, when you mentioned about there was an exodus post 98, a lot of Church of Ireland people were left. I put up a post on my own page about a year ago of the Halpennies or the Halpennies that lived in Coollattin, and two of them we know of were killed in the 98 rebellion at the Battle of Ballyran. And I found their images on findthegrave.com. They were born in Coollattin. I found them on the Aghole parish records, and it's just when you see their faces, when you see it's just amazing when you can connect back that far, and these were children that witnessed the 98 rebellion. But having read a lot of letters from a lot of the Church of Ireland from County Wexford, from the Church of Ireland community, like, it's just quite a very divided society, really, wasn't it? Like, there was that air of paranoia, siege mentality, if you want to call it. It's just it's like the community could never trust each other again after 98 with the atrocities that happened on both sides. You know, it was just we can imagine it was very, very tough.
Yeah, but the healing of that rift, I think the Fitzwilliam family, the various earls, the fifth earl, and in particular the sixth earl, was so passionately in love with Coollattin. They share a lot of the responsibility for eliminating that old sectarianism that scourged the country for so long. Like, you know, they didn't tolerate it, like, you know, and they were the landowners, and they, you know, if you put a foot wrong from a point of view of religious discrimination, you were out on your ear straight away, like, you know. So just I think the fact that we don't have it now, that's what I'm saying, is in a large measure is due to some of the earls Fitzwilliam, 2 or 3 of them in particular. Oh yeah, for sure.
And I used to find it ironic, and a lot of people would know about it, but the connection with the Dunbrody that you mentioned earlier, and how it brought over the ancestors of the Kennedys, John F. Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy. I just find it ironic that it just comes full circle that the last Earl Peter would die in a plane crash with Kathleen Kennedy.
Yeah.
That's mind blowing when you think about it. Like,
just reading a book there lately, if anybody's interested in it, it's well worth to read. Kennedy's Secret Diaries. It's the secret diary of Kathleen Kennedy, who was killed in the plane crash with Lord Peter over France in May 1848. A kind of a extramarital affair going on with her, and she was a Catholic and he was a Protestant, and that brought its own problems with it. But there's a lot of things from her diary about how she slept with him in Coollattin, and after a hunt ball in Coollattin. It's fairly raunchy stuff, but if anybody's interested in reading that kind of thing, The Secret Diaries of Kennedy is the name of the book. So you'd find her, find some of the stuff that she has written was written from Coollattin House. And
I never knew she visited Chile. That's interesting.
Yeah. I might do a posting of one of the extracts from her diary on Facebook tomorrow evening. See.
Yeah, do. That'd be great now. And like, we should also take pride that he emigrated in the 1770s, but the highly speculated ancestor of Elvis Presley comes from our part.
Yeah. And another man from your area, the Cassidy family. Butch Cassidy was one of those Cassidys.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah.
They only lived up the road from me. Jesus.
That's right there now. Yeah.
Right. So we have a lot of positive comments here now. People saying excellent, thank you, Kevin, and great talk from Doreen Nuttall. We have Dr. Jacinta Byrne-Doran. Many thanks, Kevin. Very interesting, fabulous research. We have John Byrne. Great credit to Kevin Lee on this interesting talk and all his many research projects. From Owen Dunbar on Facebook, he mentions there are still balfs in the locality of Carnew. He knows Kathleen Balfe of the Glen. Where are we now? We have excellent. Thank you, Kevin. Just from a lot of comments coming in. Great talk. Thanks. So we have a comment here from somebody. Wonderful. Thank you. As I researched the Hutton and Hopkins family, besides Jim Ree's book, are there other resources that you would suggest?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of books coming out. As you know, Colin, I've been working for years and years on the history of Coollattin, and was ready to go to print when the COVID arrived and put a stop to this. But it's going to be launched in May in Coollattin House. It's 480 pages long as a history of the full estate from Black Thomas Wentworth up to and including the sale of Coollattin to its present owners. It's the full history of the estate. There's a second book, Shoebox, is coming out for September for the seminar, which marks the 175th anniversary of Black 47. But the Shoeboxes tell the story of it. At the moment, we have about 50 families in it. It tells where they left from in Coollattin, what their circumstances were before they left, where they settled in Ontario and how they got on in Ontario, or how they got on in Western Canada or in the United States, how that family fared out, and finally, how they found their way back to unite with their roots in County Wicklow. I think Jim Rees estimated that 6,000 left, but Jim was only counting the people between 1847 and 1852, the people that are in the emigration books. There are thousands and thousands who left before the famine from 1832 onwards, and who left in the years after the Challengers left Coollattin. So it would be maybe 10,000 left. I know one family, we talked about the Cassidys there a while ago, but the Cassidys had a reunion in a place called Tweed in Canada a few years ago, and 3,000 members of the Cassidy family attended that meeting. So if you multiply over the generations, how I think for every person that left, you can count 10 people nowadays. That would be the mathematical rule for doing it.
Yeah, if I recall, actually,
a lot of people there. Just looking at the people a lot of people who have their roots here are listening tonight, and I'd hope a lot of them would come back in September to join us for what should be a great celebration in Coollattin House. And it's great that 7 new owners, the 7 people that own Coollattin, are opening its doors and making the house available for that event in September. It should be a wonderful occasion, and again, we have good speakers there, and a good program of events, and we're getting a good bit of state funding for doing it as well, which would bring the cost down and allow us to bring in people like Dr. Mark McGowan Dr. Mark would be probably the best known historian on Irish immigration to Canada during the famine years, and a wonderful speaker and a wonderful knowledge. Tom Jenkins would be another descendant of an Irish immigrant. He is chairman of the World Wide Web at the moment, and I think he has honorary chancellorships in 5 Canadian universities, but he's a proud descendant of a Coollattin immigrant as well. But hopefully Irish, and as you were saying, Colin, our own people and the Canadians will get together and we'll have one big bash of a celebration in Coollattin first week in September.
Oh, definitely. No, and it's great that it's happening. Like, fair play to you all for organising it. It'll be a tremendous event. I remember I was told this by somebody who's since passed away, and it was back in the 1960s. Maybe you might know this connection, or if you don't, you might be able to find out more. But a chairman or somebody high up in Bell Telephone in America landed his airplane in a field up in Malaysia. Apparently he had some connections going back to the 1800s of relatives that went over to Canada or to America, but it was he was high up. He was either CEO or he was on the board for Bell Telephone in the USA. It was big news. You can imagine an airplane landing in a field here in the 1960s.
Another story of a guy called Dale Hendrick. Dale Hendrick made a fortune in prospecting in the United States and in Canada. He became a very, very wealthy man, and back about 15 years ago, he came back to Ireland and he linked up with a group called Connemara Prospecting. And that is little low-flying aircraft that were able to, seem you're able to prospect from gold from the air at the moment with a low-flying aircraft. But he felt, and the people in Connemara felt, that the parent load of gold, another gold had been found in Wicklow in prehistoric times. They found that there should be gold somewhere. The only place that he found gold of any that could be conceivably mined was in a place called Hillbrook, the place where his ancestors left as assisted immigrants in I think it was 1848 they left in. But it was an ironic story that he left with his fare paid to Canada by Earl Fitzwilliam, come back and find gold in Hillbrook. Now, granted, it can't be you'd have to use the controversial method of fracking to it'd probably never be mined, but was the only place in South Wicklow that he found any gold deposit was where he had been assisted to emigrate from.
Yeah. We have a question from Claire. Kevin, will the recording be available for folks who couldn't turn in for the live version? I can just answer that. We have this, currently it's on the Trastin in Atira group. We have Trastin Atira page, we have a Trastin Atira group. It was recorded live for Facebook, but it's going to be uploaded possibly tonight or tomorrow morning on the YouTube channel, Trastin Atira. So you can go onto that and you'll see the lecture, and you can be able to watch it from there, and you can watch. We have a vast catalogue there of other lectures there going back to March 2020. So we have Karen Cassidy. Thanks, Kevin. Very interesting. Sandra Metcalf. Very enjoyable night. I have a little question. If a person put Wentworth as his father's place of residence on a marriage cert, would I be right to assume he means the estate? Would that be?
No. Wentworth is just the same as Coollattin. I suppose the best analogy that I can give is Coollattin is in Shillelagh, right? Wentworth Woodhouse is in the village of Wentworth. Actually, the church in Shillelagh is identical to the one in Wentworth, where all the Fitzwilliams are buried. Every one of them is buried there, except the one that we have up in your neck of the woods is Lady Alice, I think, buried in Kilquegan. That's and right. We have one of them buried in Shillelagh as well. 2 of them are buried there, but most of them are buried in Wentworth. But Wentworth is a lovely little village, and just in the village or on the outskirts of it, you have Wentworth Woodhouse, this massive house that was built with Irish money. So I suppose we from South Wicklow could claim that we own it.
I just remember
I suppose if everyone had their own, we own it.
Yeah. I just remember the Wentworth Woodhouse was on the Who Do You Think You Are episode with Graham Norton, and if people don't know, Graham Norton's father came from Carnew. Am I right there?
Graham Norton's father was he's not Graham Norton. He's William Walker. He's Willie Walker.
That's right. Yeah.
And he had to change the name when he joined Actors Equity because there was a William Walker there already. So he chose the name Graham Norton. I think it was after his mother's maiden name or something like that he adopted the stage name Graham Norton. But he's a Carnew man, and he was born in a little house there on the Wool Green.
The Walkers, they stretched back to the early days of the colonization of the area, didn't they?
Go right back in the Molan survey, 1728, 1730. You have the Walkers there from day one. Yeah.
Yeah. We have where are we now? Dr. Jacinta Byrne-Doran. I picked mushrooms in the field in Ballyellis where the soldiers were buried.
Yeah.
John V. This really brings our history to life. Not just something you read in a book, more of something you feel you're part of in a small way. That's what I particularly like the case studies when you showed the family Bible and all the articles that still survive.
But all those case stories will all be in the book which is coming out in September. As I said, the book called Shoeboxes. We took the name Shoebox from a lot of people in Canada had these own what you call, a box where you keep memory cards and trinkets and lockets and things belonging to the family. They have it up in the attic or somewhere, and that's where we got the name Shoebox from.
Oh no, it'll be excellent. Now it's going to be the books to look forward to now this summer. And when they are out, Kevin, you let us know, and we'll share them on.
Will indeed,
pages now as well. So, we have Lawrence Barber. Could we have names perhaps of those even here today, or for genealogical purposes? He's from the Willoughbys of the Tocker near Tinnahealy. So he says brilliant stuff, Kevin. We have Anita's iPad. She's a descendant of Hannah Johns.
She is indeed, yeah. I'd like to say hello to Laurie. Laurie was very generous towards us when we went to Toronto, and he looked after us, and we broke bread with him in his house. He's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful man, Laurie Barber. Hello, Laurie. Nice meeting up with you.
Are his Willoughbys? Are they? Is there a branch that family?
It would, yeah. There was Bishop. You might remember Bishop Noel Willoughby was the local Church of Ireland bishop for many years. The Willoughbys is a Tucker. There used to be a shop there at the crossroads. That was where his family originated. That's the big
white house there as you come from Tinnahealy.
Just before you can turn off to Tinnahealy, yeah.
I know it, yeah. From Sinead McGuire, thank you so much, Kevin, for this insightful delivery. From Claire, greetings to all from a Rawson transplant to Toronto. This was brilliant, Kevin. Thank you so much for all your hard work. From Alice McNair, thank you, Kevin. That was a wonderful talk. Marianne Higgins from Vancouver. I just lost that there now because the comments are still coming in. They push the comments up. From Vancouver, thank you, very informative. From Anne Burns, this is wonderful, Kevin, thank you. Were there notes about all of the families who left or just some of them? I'm always looking for info about my family. Colleen Payne, hi Kevin, has this been recorded? We already answered that one. It has been recorded and it'll be on YouTube. From David Cummins on Facebook, did the Coollattin Estate finish on the Carlow-Wicklow border? Money and Laney on the estate, I believe it did. They're just up the road from me. It didn't go into it didn't go into Laney. Ballinnavorta, that'd be, and Militia, they would be on the borderlands there. That's as far as I can reckon there. And Knocklow Bridge as you head into Solo, that was the border as well, Kevin, wasn't it?
That was the border, yeah.
But it extended well towards Auckland, didn't it? Just to
but it extended to a place called Redden near Annacurra. But from there to Rathdrum was belonging to Lord Mead for some reason or other. There was a gap. Ballinashash and Auckram were belonging to Lord Mead.
From where are we now? I just see a lot of these comments are all pushing up. What's Kevin's Facebook page? What we'll do is when we upload the video tomorrow on our Traston page, we'll place a link for Kevin's page and also his website as well, so you can keep an eye out for any updates or any posts as well that Kevin puts up. From Pauline Moynihan, I enjoyed the presentation. Thank you so much to all who took part in it. And from Colin, is there a connection between the Rockingham volunteers and the estate? Now, that's a good question. I believe I saw somewhere Chamney and Nixon, they wore the blue coats of the Rockingham volunteers. Clearly the title was to pay homage to the Lord Rockingham anyway.
Yeah, it was from a bit earlier. It's around 1780, 82, I think, the volunteers.
That's right,
yeah.
Rockingham.
Actually, a lot of memorabilia and buttons and weapons and so on have turned up with a lady in British Columbia in Canada has them. They belong to the Rockingham volunteers. You'll be interested in how they're fascinating bits and pieces.
Well, very interesting. I saw somewhere on an online auction, I believe it was actually a ceremonial plate dedicated to a yeoman from a family. I think it could have been from the Nixon family, but to a family in Coollattin or from one of the areas around who were in the Coollattin yeomanry, thanking them for the service within the yeomanry. I don't know if it was thank you for the service in the 90-year rebellion or for service in the yeomanry before it became the Irish Constabulary. I'm not sure.
The Rockingham volunteers at the time of the American War of Independence, I think it might have been a little bit prior to 98. But again, I'd say the seeds of Nixon's yeomanry and all that were sown in the period of the Rockingham volunteers. It wasn't hard for them to pick up or to left off. But I came in the library in Sheffield, I came across a lot of correspondence between Wainwright and Fitzwilliam, and they were totally, utterly perplexed at why the Protestant yeomanry wouldn't allow Catholics into their ranks in Shillelagh. They couldn't understand that. What's up with these people? Like why are they so bigoted towards their neighbours? And they couldn't understand it. Like, you know.
Yeah. No, I mentioned before, and I researched before when Captain Nixon got in trouble in '98 for breaking the Viceroy Lord Cornwallis's plea not to kill innocent people. And he killed, as we know, James Granger, and he got brought to Dublin and he went to the Provost Marshal, and there was comments made about the Shillelagh infantry, that they were totally Protestant, and they wouldn't speak out against Nixon. Now, as you know, he got away, and he actually ended up becoming, ironically, the Justice of the Peace then a few years later. No, it's just a fascinating history, like the history of the Coollattin Estate. It's amazing. Like, we have from Leslie here, a few descendants of the Cool Fancy and Cool Row Farrers are online. So thank you and excellent. From Shirley Monkhouse, thank you both. Great talk. Look forward to returning to Ireland again sometime. So it's great to see we have a lot of people here from overseas. We have Ito Oboy. Thank you so much, Kevin. My connection to Coollattin is through the Lacey family of Cronyhorn and the Lacey brothers of the Ballinglen Bridge. If anyone who doesn't know, I covered them on a talk that I'd done for Traston this year. Briefly, it was mentioned on one of the talks I did on 1798. They were two or three brothers that were returning from Vinegar Hill, and they were killed at Ballinglen Bridge near Tinnehealy, and there's a memorial. They're buried in Prebin, are they?
They're buried in Prebin, yeah. Their grave is in Prebin. Yeah, I think there might have been three. Originally, we only thought two, but I think three of them might have been killed. I'm not sure.
Philip Lacey, and see, it's been a while now since I've touched off 1798. And the names
they had survived. They had survived the campaign.
Yeah. Just give me 1 second. Just want to turn on the switch here now for my battery. Now, sorry about that. We have right. I think that's about it. Now we have two Lacey's and two Goslings, she mentions.
That's correct, I think.
But as you can see in the comments, we've had a fantastic response from the audience, and I won't keep you up now. Like it's 10:15 now, so we've had a great evening tonight. Now it's great from the audience, great interaction. So as I've mentioned earlier, this will be uploaded onto YouTube on the Traston Etira channel, and we'll have it out possibly tonight or first thing in the morning. And as I've mentioned as well, for anyone here who's not on the Traston Etira page, You can follow Kevin on his own personal page, or if you want, he's got the Coollattin Canadian Connection page. All excellent posts are put up to great detail. I know from following Kevin for a long time that he has great research, great and immense. He's put immense time into this. Like, so he's it's an effort that's very rewarding towards Irish history to have. Like it's a big task. Like the Coollattin Estate is massive. It's not just a small area. It's quite massive, and fair play to Kevin as well. So for also bringing back the connection with a lot of the families who went to Canada and to America and welcome them home as well. Like I've brought a few people around, and just to me it's just a wall that's in the field, but to them it's a lifetime experience for them to see where their ancestors came from. I can imagine that it's an excellent experience to have. So
I'd like to say, well done to yourself, Colm, and you've been an inspiration to us and been most helpful over the years. And I was quite amazed when I first met you a few years ago on your own site to see a young chap like yourself so interested in the heritage and history of the place. Normally it's all fuddy-duddies like myself, or it just comes with people that might be running out a road or whatever else. But to see a young guy like yourself, there's hope for everybody, and well done on your own work and your own interest in real history, what I call real history, the social history. And real history is about how people live their lives. It's what they talked about at the church gate on a Sunday, the price they got for cattle, what they had on their dinner table on a Sunday, who their neighbours were, what did they think of their neighbours. This is social history. This is what we're about, not the story of dull old battles and acts of parliament and that kind of thing. But well done to yourself, and well done on the job that you have been doing.
Oh, thanks, Kim. Right, we're going to leave it up there now. We're going to finish now, and I'd like to thank Kevin for giving us an excellent evening. Thanks very much, Kevin, for coming on. You've given us a great lecture now, and it's great to get another famine era lecture, as well as a bit of great social history, and also the connections with the Canadian Irish as well. Like that's the diaspora is an important topic that should be delved into more, and there's a fantastic rich heritage history there that's been preserved by those communities that needs to be tapped into more, and you've been doing a good job with that. So we'll finish up here, and thanks again, Kevin. So we'll say good night. Ihua.
Good night. Thanks very much. Thanks, Colm. And good night, everybody.
Take care.